Good day, and welcome to Theories and Methods in Information Systems. My name is Professor Richard Boateng, and I'll be taking you through this particular course. So in class of 2024, you are welcome to this particular course, and you'll be taking it over the next few weeks. Today, our session is on research framework. That's the introductory session to this particular course. The course objective is to be able to introduce students in information systems to the theories and methods that we apply in carrying out information systems research. So we'll be drawing on several theories and other types of research methods and data collection methods and techniques that will inform our research design. So by the time you finish the course, you understand what a theory is, how IS researchers use theories, and how they operationalize it in these theories in collecting data and analyzing the data. Okay, so let's go to our first session. Let's jump into it. Now, research framework. To explain the role of theories in the research process, this particular session will cover that and to also introduce students to different research theories and conceptual models relevant for businesses and information systems research. So what you tend to realize is that by the time we finish this course, we'll also try to, this particular session, we'll try to introduce students to different research theories and conceptual models relevant for business and information systems research. My session outline is as follows: defining research framework, the types of research framework, and building blocks of a theory. We'll be drawing on a book that I wrote titled Information Systems Theories for Students and Students, Researchers, and Practitioners. We'll be looking at chapter 1 of that one, and that's a very good book. It's a free ebook sponsored by the Danida, that's the Danish International Development Agency. And then we would also be drawing on another book of mine called Research Made Easy, which you can buy from the Legon bookshop or from Amazon. Chapter 5. This one looks at the methods part of our research, and also looks at chapter 5 looks into what theories are for research. And then chapter 6 looks into and chapter 6, 7, and 8 then delves into the methods of research. But it's not for just IS students, it's a generic research book. That's why I call it Research Made Easy. So defining research framework. Good. Some of you may be asking that, why is he taking us back to what a research? Okay, so let's take it for example that you may have understood what research is, but do you understand how research is defined in a contemporary nature to be able to embrace the different perspectives that tend to be an opportunity for organizations to take advantage of, or tend to be a challenge for institutions to address? Maybe in your mind, research is just an investigation to a particular topic or social or business phenomena. But this is a very simplistic definition of research. It doesn't actually tell you what it entails. We define research for this particular course. We'll be defining research as an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. Now, the reason why this research definition is important is that it brings out some of the key building blocks of every research activity. And that the previous one doesn't actually cover that one. But most people know research to be just an investigation, but it goes beyond that. A research is an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. It's systematic because when you talk about research, especially within academia or within the information systems, which is an academic discipline, researchers tend to belong to a scientific community, and those scientific communities that they belong to define certain scientific procedures and principles which researchers within that community tend to or need to adhere to in order to get reliable results and accurate results within that research discipline. So information system researchers may define that this is what we identify as information systems research, and these are the scientific procedures and principles which are acceptable within the information systems research. So systematic means that there's a definite set of scientific procedures and principles which every researcher need to follow, especially belonging to a particular discipline. So a marketing research done by a marketer will be the committee will expect certain dimensions of or principles and scientific procedures which are accustomed to marketing should be followed. The same way information systems. For example, if an information system person does research, we will need to make sure that we can find what is the artifact being studied, which is the system being studied, where is it being studied, the context is it being studied, and how is it being applied. So these things play a very key role in trying to understand what information systems researcher. And throughout the semester, we'll be talking about some of these scientific principles that govern information systems research. Now, apart from that, a research, in a generic manner, every research needs to be organized, meaning that there are some steps that a researcher needs to follow. So a research process may have a step such as being asking the right question, being able to design a study to collect data to answer the question, being able to go to the field and collect the data, after collecting the data, analyze the data, and then interpret the data and communicate it in a report. Now, all these steps I mentioned is what we call the structure or method for doing research. Now, it tends to be generic to all across quite a number of research because every research needs to find an answer to a question. Every research needs a research design to be able to operationalize the research and collect data that will inform the answers that they will end up generating by analyzing that particular data. So we systematic and organize. And every research also wants to find answers to questions. So finding answers because every research seeks to answer a question or a number of questions. And that answer could either be yes or no, but it's still an answer. And then beyond that, the researcher has in finding answers means that there should be a question. The questions are what is central to the research. If there's no question, how do we even begin the research? So a research is a search process which is directed by a question. And that question is what keeps the research focused and relevant and useful for whoever is intending to carry out the research. So without the question, the researcher doesn't even have a focus or a drive or purpose to how to start the research. So I always argue that the centrality of every research is the question that is being asked, meaning that I can carry out a research, you can carry out a research. We can have the same topic that we want to do research on, but I can have a different research question and you can have a different research question. And that would differentiate the research that we are carrying out because you have got different questions. For example, if there's decline in employee productivity in a particular division or in an information science project, somebody may take it from may want to look at the job design and then maybe the job responsibility and whether it affects people morale. And that person may also come from a perspective of looking at remuneration and then looking at maybe supervisor relationships. The fact that when a person gets appropriate instructions from the supervisors to carry out the activity. And is that what is causing a decline in employee productivity? So even in this simple example I've given, the person that is carrying out research in the latter sense, in terms of looking at productivity from supervisor relationships, will ask different questions as compared to the person who is just looking at it from the job design or the job responsibility. So the centrality of every research is the question that is being asked. What will differentiate my research from your research is the questions that we ask, not necessarily just the topic. We can have the same topic, but we can ask different questions. Now, to be able to carry out a research, there's going to be the frame in which the research takes place. We usually call that the research framework. Now, what is the research framework? When I say I want to carry out a research and try to find out the decline in employee productivity, I could look at things like employee absenteeism. I can look at employee motivation. I could look at employee, let's say, employee remuneration. Now, all these variables that I mentioned are things that can be used to study the phenomenon. And if I choose to use those ones to study the phenomenon, I'll frame the research around these three variables I've just mentioned. So it means that my research questions are going to be will concern these three variables. And when I develop a questionnaire, I will be having maybe a set of questions, either asking on asking questions on absenteeism, asking questions on motivation, asking questions on, let's say, supervisor relationships. So because those variables I've chosen are the key variables I want to do my research on, they become what frames the research. So we say that a research framework presents the way of studying a phenomenon or studying a phenomenon through the lens of certain variables selected by the researcher in order to investigate or find a solution to the research problem. It will outline the relationships between the variables in a manner that explains or predicts the social phenomenon within a specific research problem. So I will say that if I'm carrying out research and I've got a framework, the framework will tell me how it actually tries to address the issue. So if I say employee absenteeism, I may end up saying that when we have high employee absenteeism, it will lead to the decrease in employee an increase in employee productivity, because I'm looking at the relationship between the two. Somebody can also say that when we have a high, a low, a low employee motivation, that means that they are not enthusiastic, or they are not encouraged, and they are not motivated. That could also reflect in a decline in productivity. So in all of these things, or even if supervisor instructions are unclear, it could also affect decision making and being able to take initiative or take the next step, which will also have an effect on employee productivity, or lead to a decline of it. Now, all of these things are what I call the relationships that exist between the variable and the phenomenon of study, and in order to explain the phenomenon. So a research framework seeks to explain the phenomenon, but in the lens of the variables that have been used to define the research framework. So we call it a frame because it outlines the relationships or the variables that relate to explain or predict the social or to predict a particular social phenomena. And because of that, my research questions are going to be within those limits. Hence, we call it the frame for the research. And now let's take examples. So I'm going to look at a number of different IS research works and other management research works, and we'll look at how they develop, what is their research framework, and how it actually affects the study. Hi. Okay, so let's take the first one. So this first paper is a paper that I wrote out of my PhD. Okay, so it's titled Resources, Electronic Commerce Capabilities, and Electronic Commerce Benefits, Conceptualizing the Links. So this is what the paper is about. This is an abstract. I'm going to share the paper with you so you can look at it yourself later. But what is trying to answer the question the research is trying to answer, the question is the research is trying to answer is here. How do developing country firms, if you can see it here, develop capabilities and achieve e-commerce benefits amidst their national constraints? How do developing country firms orient their resources to develop e-commerce capabilities? So how do they orient their resources to develop e-commerce capabilities and achieve e-commerce benefits amidst their national constraints? So let's take it. Let's look at it into detail. So they say the research uses the resource-based theory and the capability lifecycle framework as a theoretical lens. So I've chosen what is going to be what will frame my study. I've chosen a theory, and I've also chosen what we call a framework here. For the purpose of the study, these two is what I'm going to combine and inform my research framework to collect data. That means that when I collect the data, my data will be based on the two theoretical lengths, the two theoretical perspective that I've chosen as my theoretical lens. Good. And there's a justification for it. You can read them later. Now, if you look at the operationalization, I explain what the resource-based theory is. And after that, I go in to develop a model that's going to be my conceptual model. So this conceptual model or my research framework. Conceptual model means that it's a suggested relationship. Okay, so figure one summarizes these conceptual arguments in the resource-based model for e-commerce capability evolution. The model has 8 constructs, namely strategic orientation. Okay, and then from there you go to as defined by the firm, 3 stages of capability development. Okay, and then 2 post-maturity stages, and then two interrelated outcomes, e-commerce capabilities and benefits. The model informed the collection and presentation analysis of this data. So remember I mentioned that the model is going to direct you. So it starts from resource identification and at the funding stage, then goes to the developing stage. E-commerce capabilities are developed, then goes to e-commerce benefits. By the same developing stage, the firm may develop its resources and to get to a maturity stage. And at the maturity stage, it can either be renewed, deployed, or recombined or replicated, or it can retrench. So I will not use the resource again, and the resource will die. So this is what I mentioned as my conceptual framework or my research framework. So it's a figure one resource-based model of e-commerce capability evolution. Now, when the person carries out the study, collects the data, you can read that later. It will analyze the study based on that model. So if you look at it even here, okay, so let me see if I can. I want. Okay, good, good. So you see, this is a model that I had. We use a model to look at different stages of capabilities in the organization. The organization is a used car retailer, and then it was selling cars in Ghana, and we're using the model that we developed there to understand its car sales, the resources that you deploy to be able to sell cars on an online platform. So I went through, used the same model, went through different iterations, and then when we finished, we developed, we postulated or we were able to suggest a new model based on the old one. So now we are saying that the whole thing about capability development takes place within the nation. So there's a national context at the back there. So the firm starts with a strategic orientation, the strategy that it chooses to apply. You go to the founding stage, then you go to the developing stage. Then these e-commerce capabilities are realized or developed. And after they are developed, it goes to the firm may choose some of them and align it with its business processes. And as I align it with the business processes, it then generates benefits. And then after some time, the benefit cycle, the benefits are continuous, and it gets to a maturity stage in which the firm it becomes like tacit to the firm. Every time they put in the resources, they gain this particular e-commerce benefits. Now to get to the maturity stage, unless there's a shake-up in the organization, the organization can just continue rebuilding, redeploying the same type of resources to be able to generate the same type of benefits. But after some time, if there's a change of the orientation of the firm may choose to decline some of the resources or by retiring or retrenching them. So this is just a big basic explanation of what we found. We started from the resource-based theory and the capability model. We projected, we were able to conceptualize a model that we suggested earlier. And after the collecting data, we were able to now present this one. So now this is where a revised resource-based model because it's based on a resource-based theory, resource-based model of the e-commerce capability evolution. That is an example. So now the data has been able to generate this model out of the study. Now let's look at another one. Okay. When we are doing the tutorials, I can answer your questions, so don't worry about that. And I know that you may have some questions. Now, this is another study. This study that was based on mobile phones and micro trading activities of firms, conceptualizing the link. The core question that you want to answer is, okay, the paper investigate the impact of mobile phones on micro trading activities of women traders in Ghana. So that's what he wants to do. So it starts by looking at transaction cost theory, which is arguably the most common used theory in studying issues related to assessment of the impact of ICT on commerce or trade. Transaction cost described as the cost of running a system. Also, two types of cost, coordination cost and actor motivation cost. It goes to explain these ones and link them into information system. Then after that, it also draws on other types of literature. For example, it draws on literature on mobile phones and how mobile phones are used in organizations and by an individual or for trade. And then it looks at the type of benefits you might get from using mobile phones in a trade activity, strategic relation and operational benefits, and explains them. And after that, it goes on to talk about the fact that micro trading in micro trading, traders may use the mobile phone in the pre-trade, during trade, and post-trade. Now, these are the stages of trading according to economics. So, and then he drew on those ones to be able to tell us that organization and firms who are in the micro traders as or traders as micro traders may be able to use mobile phones in a particular way. What would they do? They would go through a pre-trade stage, a during trade stage, and post-trade. And in each of these steps, the mobile phones will be used for different things and different activities. Now, based on this, a model was developed, and it's saying that a conceptual model framework of impact of mobile phones on micro trading. I mean conceptual because it is being conceptualized within the literature. It's being proposed. That's why we call it conceptual framework. Or I can also call it research framework. It's the same thing. But we are trying to say that it's conceptualized from the data from the literature that we have. We are not collecting data yet. So we start by saying the traders who are not a mobile phone, they will use it during the pre-trade, during trade and post-trade. But we don't have the key activities underneath that they use it for. Then from there, to generate certain benefits, strategic benefits, relational benefits, and then operational benefits. And these benefits are coming from the literature that exists earlier on the ICT and commerce literature, which we mentioned that earlier. Now, to then lead to an impact. The impact could be incremental impact, transformational impact, and then production impact. Now, sorry about the two tip that is showing here. It's just showing the link to the paper itself. Now, what then it tells you is that if you develop adopt a mobile phone as a market woman, you can apply it to the during trade, the post trade, and then the during the pre-trade, during trade, and post trade activities. You likely get these benefits and then lead to specific impact. Now, after collecting data and analyzing it within a particular market in Accra, I think Medina market is one, Kanishi market is one. I look at specific networks. This was a new model that was proposed, that the impact of mobile phones on micro trading activity of traders in Ghana will be reflected as, now you can look at it carefully, the pre-trade, during trade, and post-trade has content there now because they are going to the field and collected specific data. And then it's still leading to the benefits. And in the type of impact, instead of having three impacts, we have only two: incremental effects and transformation, because that's what the data could tell us. So now this is a revised model based on what we had earlier. And this is what is being contributed out by the paper, that we have been able to establish a relationship between mobile phones and micro traders. Okay. Now let's continue on. Let's continue and look at other examples again. Okay, I want to stay away from my own working. Now let's look at a work from Professor Ifa, institutional effects of e-payment entrepreneurship in developing countries, enablers and constraints. Professor in this particular paper is using what we call the institutional theory as its lens. So the institutional theory, let's go into it, is a new institutional theory. It has got certain dimensions that we are used for measurement or for examining the forces in the organization and in institution that tend to constrain behavior. Now, if you look at it very carefully, there are three pillars here that are suggested by Scott. There's a regulative, the normative, and the cognitive. So these are the three things that the professor is going to use to look at his study. So you look at regulative institutions, how they can affect e-payment. And then talking about normative institutions. Let's read the normative. Normative institutions are norms and values that undermine, that determine legitimate and illegitimate actions in a particular social context. They include social and professional norms that define what is not acceptable in line with established traditions, practices, and values. Normative institutions offer guidelines for organizations to determine legitimate actions. In this study, normative institutions refer to established norms, traditions, and practices in the social, technical, and economic environment of e-payment, of the e-payment startup firm. Now, you see, in this study, so one thing that you realize is that theories could exist, but you have to apply it to your study in this study. So that's why Professor said in this study. And look at this one too, cognitive institutions. Cognitive institutions are taken for granted customs and traditions that control sense-making and decision-making in social actors. Cognitive institutions, therefore, refer to the mental maps of individual or group decision makers. Such institutions are strongly associated with culture, habits, and thinking patterns of actors. Cognitive institutions demonstrate the unawareness and misunderstanding of levels of the decision actor. In this study, again, in this study, cognitive institutions refer to the thinking and decision-making patterns of the e-payment entrepreneur. So according to Scott, the distinction between the three pillars are as regulative, normative, and cognitive institutions are for analytical purposes only. In practice, they can overlap. So that's given there. Now, in relation to with different uses of theory and information systems research as a source of hypothesis guidance or lens of scaffolding, this study employs the new theory as an analytical lens. Then he justify why he's choosing that one. The rationale for choosing new theory is based on useful concepts it offers to help understand the regulative and social cognitive forces that enabled or constrained the e-payment entrepreneurship initiative in a developing country. So in this line, this is in line with the position of other authors that the shared theory is useful for investigating the relation between information systems innovations and their organizational and broader societal environments. Okay, now what he's trying to point out is that this particular study is carrying out is understanding e-payment entrepreneurship within a Ghanaian context, but it was shaped, the whole endeavor or initiative was affected by a number of institutions in society. One is the regulative institutions, one is the normative institutions, and one is the cognitive institution. That's the cultural thinking of people and how they see money. So, and then all these three were put together to be able to do the analysis, and it best fits the study. So, whenever you are looking at what is a research framework, notice that the research framework can be built out of the person's reading of the literature and out of a theory has found the literature, and then he combines it with the literature and then uses to explain what he's going to do. Like what Prof has done here. You saw that the same thing in my conceptualizing the link between micro traders and mobile phones. We began with transaction cost theory, then we ended up talking about so many things, including the dimensions of trade and then the outcomes of using a mobile phone as a trader, and then the impact you gain out of it. Good. So let's look at an example again. An example. By the time we finish the semester, you would have understood these things into detail. Let me see if I have one more example here. Let's see. E-commerce in Ghana. Now, this is a paper that I wrote with one of my former PhD students, and it's titled Determinants of E-Learning Adoption in Universities, Evidence from Developing Country. So he's using what we call the Technology Organization Environment Framework. You see it's written here. Technology. Let's go and let's look for it. So in that, okay, so good. Now listen to we focus on, you say we focus. Remember, I said that a research framework means that you have selected certain variables. So you made a choice. We focus on reviewing three main areas that are particularly relevant to provide the theoretical foundation of this research. The determinants of e-learning adoption in universities with a focus on developing countries. Okay, these are three papers. The e-learning stakeholder perspective of researchers and conceptual approaches to e-learning research. Now, therefore, to satisfy the purpose, the review focused on research papers on e-learning adoption in developing countries. Okay, so he goes on to say that he looked at the studies and different studies have been done, and he has summarized the studies here. Okay, so if you look at the studies that have been summarized here, look at this one. The first study that is here that by you use the technology acceptance model, we call that TAM. And he did a survey, and the determinants for e-learning in this one was computer self-efficacy and perceived usefulness. Now, the technology acceptance model says that perceived usefulness and then perceived ease of use tend to predict a person's behavior or intention to perform a behavior. So he's talking about, then this study was done, and these were the adoption determinants that you found. Then there's another one, Motagian. Motagian et al. Technology acceptance model and the information system success model. And the success model of information system is also another model that talks about certain dimensions of information system. For example, the system quality, then the system quality, then net benefits you gain from the system, and other dimensions. So they used it for the study and came up with perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and system quality as tend to matter when you talk about when you are looking into e-learning or e-learning within the higher educational environment as done by this paper, but in the lens of the technology acceptance model. Now, so there are quite a number of them that is pointed out, different papers that they have carried out, and what were the factors that they were able to tell each of the papers. So let's go back and I'll show you what the person did. Okay. So in this particular study, he reviewed TAM, then reviewed the Dillon and MacLean model, and then after that, he was able to explain based on these two what kind of variables that will be necessary. Now, you find that there's so many variables that are being discussed in the literature, and some of them are technology variables, some of them are technology variables based on the target audience, meaning that the learners, and then there are technology variables based on the institution itself. So, but we didn't research, we didn't stop here. It went on to find out that if there are different factors, look at that tend to predict e-learning. There are technology factors, there are organizational factors, and sometimes there are even other things that come from the context, like the national context or the educational system there. So in that particular scenario, you end up realizing that he has to use a theory that can embrace more factors. And he then picked up what you call the TOE, the Technology Organization Environment Framework, which was designed by a gentleman called two people called Tonaski and Fleischer. Now, Tonaski and Fleischer pointed out in a paper, in a book that was written earlier, about the fact that it is the only model that emphasizes more on the individual different factors to underpin the distinctive nature of decision makers when they are dealing with technology. So it has the technological factors, it has the organizational factors, and it has the environmental factors. So the student, we went ahead to look at the technological context. What factors tend to matter in our view for e-learning? And then we looked at two factors there. First of all, has to be the IT infrastructure, and another one has to be perceived ease of use. So that was two captured there. And then you go to organizational context, you have got organizational compatibility with adoption of e-learning, and then expected benefits that you gain from e-learning. And then competitive pressures and how it influences e-learning. Okay. Educational patterns and how they influence e-learning. That's all coming from the environmental factor. Then the content of the e-learning course also can influence the adoption. So with this, we carried out the study, and I believe there is a model here that shows you how authors are post-study framework. I think we should something like that. Good. So this is what we found. That across the different stakeholders, for the students, IT infrastructure, organizational capability, and educational partners, competitive pressure, and content of the course and e-learning curriculum were the things that mattered more to them. When you get to the lecturers, the ease of use of the technology, the educational partners, and the curriculum itself was a challenge. And then with administrators, the IT infrastructure, that's one, and the compatibility and expected benefits, that's also two. Okay. And this is what guided the study, and it was based on this framework. The student collected data and then went to analyze it and ended up writing this paper. So there are quite a number of procedures in managing theories. There are very quite a number. Sometimes you may not even have a diagram. It may be just a write-up, and that will still inform the study. For example, if you look at this paper that I did on advancing e-commerce beyond readiness, a case study on Ghana, I looked at 4 factors: government, technology, market, and cultural readiness factors. But these factors are not coming out of just an umbrella just mentioned there in the just show up. They are coming from other research. So, for example, the research framework I was able to develop, those 4 variables came from one. I think first of all the CPT framework, which was done by Bajaj and Leonard, the culture, policy, and technology framework. So here I picked in my work, I picked up maybe the policy part, and part of the culture was discussed too in my work. So we have the culture, um, culture policy, and then technology. Then there's another model called the PEM model, that's perceived e-readiness model, which was done by Mola and Leka. Mola is actually my PhD supervisor. So based on these things, I narrowed down on from these two frameworks, I narrowed down on government readiness as in PEM model or as noted as what policy in the CPT field. So now I'm showing where I brought it from and what it tends to mean here. Then I define it. Then I go to technological readiness. How is it mentioned in PEM and how is it also mentioned in CPT before I make a choice out of it? Then I have market forces readiness. This is more in PEM, but it's not in CPT. And the lastly, cultural readiness, which is in CPT, but not in PEM. So in a nutshell, I then had questions like, how do the readiness factors, government, technology, market, and culture enable or constrain the adoption of e-commerce by Ghanaian firms? How are Ghanaian firms addressing these challenges or taking advantage of opportunity posed by these challenges? So this is what we narrowed down on. I've taken my research framework is based on certain factors that existed already in the literature, and I was able to put them together and make a case out of it to be able to come up with a framework that I can use to collect my data. Okay, now I'm not reading the whole paper to you. I'm just pointing it out. I just wanted to show you that these things exist. These things exist. Let me just show last one coming from, let's say, marketing. There's a good. Let me just show this one and then we can wrap up. Um, okay, I don't think I have it. Let me close some of the things. Sorry, don't close some of the things I have. Okay, so pardon me. Wow. Okay. Still not showing. I'll pick one of them and see if it's also good. This is a theory of planned behavior to understand brand love. So the theory of planned behavior says that there are three things that predict a person's behavior or intention to perform behavior. Now it says that we present this presents that it contributes to research by applying the theory of maybe still small for planned behavior to the context of brand love. The established theory provides a thorough understanding of the determinants of consumer intentions and behavior. So this is what you are using. Now, the the theories says that there is attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control that tend to predict people's behavior. So this person who is doing theory of planned behavior is going to use these three things to do his work. And then he has got other variables such as the brand love, which is the outcome that you want, the behavior you want to expect. But before that behavior can occur, he talks about brand forgiveness. So in his work, he is able to develop certain hypotheses and then propose this particular model. Attitude, subjective norm, and then behavioral control, two variables in the affordability to buy that particular I think it's a luxury to that particular brand, yes, that particular brand. Okay. And then propensity to anthropomorphize. That means that the ability for that particular brand to act like a human being or have a human nature in terms of how we position them, how we package them, how we even market it. So he's saying that the three of them will lead to brand love. That's the intention to perform a behavior, and then to lead to forgiveness. Okay, so this is what he did as his more proposed research model. So he proposed. Then he put this one, we call this here a moderator, which tend to influence whether the whatever you are expecting is higher or low. So the level of involvement can then influence whether what you're experiencing is high or low in terms of brand love. So that's why you put the arrow here, and then there's a variable here. Okay, so in effect, you have got attitude as one of the variables, subjective norm, and then propensity and perceived behavioral control as one. You have got brand love and brand forgiveness. Then we have another surprise, which is just an intervention of involvement within the particular model. So the person goes to collect data and then analyzes the data. Okay. And by the time you finish, I've got so much relationship. I don't want to get into the, but I'm just trying to point to you that this could be how a model can be conceptualized. Okay. So let's go back to our slides. We are looking at quite a number of examples. And I know you may have questions. You can ask your questions now or you can compile them, and when we come to class for tutorials, you can then ask me. Now, when you're carrying out the research paper, let's look at where the research framework fits in the long essay you're going to do or the thesis you're going to write. Now, the research paper is part of the literature review. In a research paper, the research framework is part of the literature review. So there's a section of your paper called the literature review in which you can have the theory and the conceptual framework discussed. And the examples I showed you, some of the papers had that. Other papers can have, or other approaches can have the research framework on its own, standing on its own. Like the paper I talked about, the CPT framework and the PEM model from Ghana, you saw that there's a place called theoretical research framework, and it is discussed. And if you are doing a PhD on M4, you may call that one theoretical foundations or research framework. But then your literature review chapter will just explain the concepts, and then the chapter 3 you go into the deeper things of talking about the research framework and then the theoretical foundations. If you are doing a long essay, which is an MBA student, you may not necessarily have to differentiate your research framework. You may add it to the chapter 2, and that will be okay. Okay. So let's continue. So what are the types of research framework? What are the types of research framework? Now, the types of research framework is quite an interesting issue to explain. Now, a research framework is what is framed the research. So where did it come from? It can either come from somebody having a theory and adapting the theory and using it for the study. So the theory of planned behavior that we talked about right now, if you looked at it, somebody had theory of planned behavior, and then in this study, he used this as this. Prof. If I had institutional theory, but he said that as applied in this study, this is what it will mean. So he take the theory and then apply it to his study. So they got a theory, adapt it or modify it sometimes, or adapt it to suit the study that is carrying out. So what he had then done is that he had now conceptualized something new based on existing theory. So that one can be said that a theory, a research framework can be based on a modifying or adapting the existing theory for your work. But there are others who just read the literature and then from the literature itself come up with their own framework. They don't try to pick somebody's story to massage it or to change it or extend it. They just read the literature and come up with their own framework. And that one too is acceptable. So you have got a theory-driven research, and you can have just a conceptual framework coming from the literature review, which others do. Okay. Now, so this is a research framework. This is where the pathway for saying that how research frameworks are developed. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Now, within this, we need to understand what's a theory. I've been throwing the word around a lot. Theory. A theory is a coherent set of general propositions, a set coming together, which are used for explaining, for understanding, and for predicting apparent relations of certain observed phenomena. In society, we observe phenomena, we observe patterns of behavior. Then, based on that, we can then theorize, establish a coherent set of general propositions that explains why this is acting this particular way. Okay. So that's what we call a theory. Please, you understand it. I hope you understand it. Now, the theories are empirically tested and verified, and can be shown as a schematic diagram or mathematical equation, or no equation at all. So, for example, the paper I showed you that I picked up, there's something from culture, policy, technology, and then the other one by Bajaj. Okay, CPT from Bajaj, and then I picked that one, I combined to another one, and I was able to come up with certain dimensions of the PEM models, come up with certain dimensions I want to study. Now, what I have done is that in that particular paper, you don't see any schematic diagram in it because I just explain the variables and I use them to do my work. So in that scenario, you can have a theoretical framework, a research framework that is just based on text. It's not based on a diagram. So just keep it in mind. But it could be largely, most of them are based on a diagram. Now, this is a research framework based on the theory of planned behavior. Theory of planned behavior says that a person to perform a behavior is governed by three things: attitude towards the behavior, subjective of towards the behavior, and perceived behavioral control. Okay, so your perceived behavioral control to either perceived behavioral control are things that can constrain your intention to perform the behavior or the actual performance of the behavior. The rest of the other variables don't go to the actual performance. It's only perceived behavioral control through H4 that goes to the behavior actual performance of of that particular intended behavior. So when you have a theory of planned behavior, what it does is I can explain all type of behavior that are planned or intended and put together. That's what it tries to do. They explain why they are happening in that particular way. The attitude of the person, subjective norm and perceived behavioral control. Okay. Then there's also what we call the theory of reason action, which was part of what led to the formation of the theory of planned behavior. The theory of reason action says that a person's intention to perform a behavior is a function of the person's attitude toward the behavior and some empirically derived weights that tend to subject the person who one subjective norm related to the performing the behavior. So those weights can actually influence both of them, can influence the attitude and can influence the subjective norm. So this one doesn't have any perceived behavioral control, just only these two, and then you play it. You can be able to explain why people act in a particular the theory of reason action. Now, this particular model has been placed aside, and because there are newer models that tend to explain more than what this one can do, or usual research framework. So I just wanted to play this as this is one of the frameworks that existed in the past in information system, but now people have improved and done more to it. So in a research work, either your PhD or your long essay, you need to understand that your research framework will exist as in a conceptual format, meaning that it may bring certain factors together to explain a phenomenon. Yeah. And with time, other ones, the research framework too can draw on theory and then use it to inform its conceptual framework that it is developing. So you can be based on theory, but you should understand that by the time you finish the research framework, you have been able to postulate that this is how something works, either from the literature or from the theory. This is how something works. Okay. Now let us look into detail so that I can make it better for you to understand it. The conceptual framework is some analytical schemes which simplify the reality to make it easier to discuss, analyze the research. Somebody may say this is a definition in research work. Yeah, but a conceptual framework is part of the research process. Now, what it does is that it simplifies reality by selecting certain observed phenomena or variables and suggesting certain relations between them. Okay? So the conceptual framework will make things easier for us to discuss and be able to learn. That's what its key job. So let's look at this factor-based model. Factors are contributing to an outcome or a dependent variable. So you have got unemployment as the dependent variable, and all the other ones are independent and they are hitting on the unemployment nature. So your unemployment is the dependent variable. The other ones, low wages, political instability, lack of startup capital, and high interest rates are your independent variables. The independent variables will lead towards the unemployment, and that will then generate emphasize why people are unemployed, and we want to try and work on that. So what do you want to do? You want to make sure you address these other four so that the impact on unemployment will be lower. Okay, so you have seen that these ones I just mentioned, the outcome variable is here as unemployment, and then the other four are the predictors or factors that tend to influence unemployment, and that's what is put across here. Now, this is not, anyway, saying this is exhaustive. There could be more reasons why unemployment is occurring in a particular locality. Building blocks of a theory. So this is the last part of what we want to look into. We mentioned that the theory is of a set of general proposition. That means that in a theory, you find something you call a proposition. Oh, sorry. And then they are used as principles of explanation, understanding, and prediction. That is the logic of the principle of the theory. So you find something called logic. Okay, an apparent relation of certain observed phenomena. Apparent relation of certain observed phenomena. Now, a very good theory too is also based empirically tested and verified. So the phenomena that we are going to try to explain, we have studied for some time. We are saying this is the best way to approach it. Okay. So the two purposes of a theory is understanding and prediction, which I just mentioned in the previous slide, to help design the research question, guide the selection of relevant data, interpret the data, and propose explanations proposed explanations of causes and influences. Now, the building blocks of a theory say that there are four key dimensions of a theory: the constructs, those abstract concepts specified at the high level of abstraction, which is chosen specifically to explain the phenomenon of interest. Take an example. You have a triangle, and or even a right angle triangle. Then you have certain noise going on. People are talking, playing, and all kinds of stuff. But you have this right angle triangle within this market space. Now, this particular right angle triangle, if you want to find the area, you multiply the length times the breadth, if I'm right, or you then have to do half of it. So half length times breadth. Okay, so half base times height. So half length times breadth. So that'll give the area of that particular rectangle. Sorry, a triangle. Half base times height. Now, the base there is one of your constructs, the height is one of your constructs. That's what I wanted to emphasize here. So, but the abstract concepts are specified at high level of abstraction, choosing to specifically explain the phenomenon of interest. The proposition, however, is the relation that exists between the constructs. So half of the base, you multiply it by height, and then your area of the rectangle. So that particular half base times height is what we call the relation propositions. What is the empirical formulation of the proposition? What is the relation between the two variables? How did they relate together? Then you can then say a proposition can be able to explain the two. Then after that, what does the theory stand for? What the conceptual framework, what does it stand for? This one stands for this. What does it seeking to explain? For the example I gave earlier, one of the things that you realize that the half base times height is trying to just find the area of that particular right angle triangle, nothing else, area. So the logic is what is the glue that connects the theoretical constructs and provides meaning and relevance to the relationships between these constructs. So we then emphasize and call them those ones as the glue that puts together. However, for every type of theory, there are some assumptions about value, time, and boundary conditions that govern the theory. So that means that the theories were done, but you are not having a perfect ideal world. So you also have to take into cognizance how the theories were formulated and what were the conditions of the context that it was formulated within. So we'll talk about these one after the other. Okay. Now, a theory is not data. Theory is not typology or taxonomies or just your findings. Theory is not just it's not a theory. Just as a pile of stones is not a house. So you see it yourself or you've read it yourself. Likewise, a collection of constructs, a typology of constructs is not a theory. Because theories must go well beyond constructs to include propositions, explanations, and boundary conditions. That's when we can call it a theory. So now you understand. So you need to have almost all the four dimensions for it to be accepted as a theory. Okay. So let's see what goes into. Constructs are abstract concepts that explain the phenomenon of interest, like leadership, productivity, morale. A generalized idea about class of objects, attributes, and occurrences, and processes that have been given a name. Okay. They bring out the generalizable properties related to the objects, people, and events under study. Okay, so one thing we have to appreciate here is that the abstract concepts tend to reflect and explain the phenomenon. So you have leadership as one, the productivity as one, and then morale as one. Okay. Now, the constructs are abstract concepts that explain the phenomenon, but they are also the generalized idea of a class of objects, attributes, and occurrences, or processes that have been given that has been given a name. So, for example, single dimensional variables include weight and then age. Then you have multi-dimensional variable, that's trust and commitment. So trust can be looked at it from three different dimensions, and commitment can be looked at it from three different dimensions. Okay. So the construct itself, at certain stage, you need to make it operational or make it measurable. That's when we come to a variable. So there could be a single dimensional construct, there could be a multiple dimensional construct. And as we go through the term, you'll be able to see which of the theories have got multiple dimensional constructs within the theories. Good. Now, these are, when you talk about concepts and concepts and what we mentioned here as constructs, they tend to have a difference between what we are seeing and what we are experiencing. In the reality, at the empirical level, where the human life is, observation of objectives and events is defines our reality. What we see is the outcome of whatever is going on. Then at the actual level, we have all these ideals of the fact that I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do that. All of them are the constructs exist in those concepts. So when we say conceptual framework or research framework, we say bring what is in that abstract world, conceptualize the way that we can be able to use to collect data and analyze data to explain what is happening in the empirical level. Well, let me take it again. We will take the constructs and then explain the relation between them, but within the perspective of the empirical level, whatever is occurring at that level. So all contracts must have a clearly spelled out operational definition to specify how the contract will be measured, at what level of analysis it will be applied, whether the individual level, group, organization, industry, national, regional, and global. A construct operates at the theoretical level, hence the variable it used to measure it is at the what? Empirical level. Okay. For example, job performance as an abstract concept can be expressed as a variable in the form of work samples, absenteeism, and or production count. Okay, so you can see here that there's a step in trying to understand the concept, abstract concept. One of the things that is pointing out is that if it's expressed as a variable, you can see it in different forms so that it's appreciated well. So that the work samples, absenteeism, and production count could be a characteristics of um, um, looking at job performance. Okay. Now the propositions are statements that exist between the two concepts or among constructs. So a hypothesis is a proposition that is empirically testable. It will come out. It is an empirical statement concerned with the relationship among variables. However, a variable is anything that may assume different numerical values. Okay. So you have got a proposition that tells the relation between the two. Okay. Now, yeah, at the theoretical plane, we have construct A and then construct B. And then an independent one, you have independent variable going to the dependent variable. Okay. So we are here where we have the independent variable. We are trying to get more momentum before we go and explain or even launch the whole initiative. Okay. Okay, so the theory of planned behavior, what does this seek to do? It tells us that attitude, subjective and perceived behavioral control lead to intention, then lead to behavior. So in addressing and understanding why people are behaving in a particular way, you should be able to address the root cause, the attitude that the subjective know before you do something about other people's. You appreciate what it means by intention, what it means by the actual behavior. One of the things that you see, there's a dotted line. That means that perceived behavioral control can also affect the actual performance of a behavior. For example, if you go to Accra Mall and we are just hanging out as friends, after sometimes we want to leave, but somebody may end up saying, or even at the time you're hanging out, they bring food. He says he's satisfied, he doesn't want to eat. And it could be because he ate at home before coming, or it could be that he's broke and doesn't want to be seen as contributing to it. So sometimes one of the things that you end up realizing is that people may have good intention, but they may not necessarily end up becoming a behavior, or they may not implement it. So your attitude, subjective knowledge, and perceived behavioral control. Okay, so we mentioned that the purpose of the study is to understand and to predict. We mentioned that already. Now, there is another one, that's the theory of planned behavior, which started as a theory of present action in 1980 to predict an individual's intention to engage in behavior at a specific time or place. The theory was intended to explain all behaviors over which people will have the ability to exert self-control. Okay, so that means that after some time, you should be able to do things on your own. Now, we talked about what the components are, and these components tend to matter. They tend to really matter. But the theory of planned behavior has its own limitations. One is the fact that I'm not going to go through all, but I want to mention one or two. It assumes that the person has acquired opportunities and resources to be successful in performing the desired behavior. So it means that you think that people with the right attitude, with the right subjective norm, he can just go ahead and just implement or decide to implement that particular behavior. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So assuming a person has acquired opportunity and resources to be successful in performing the desired behavior is it's not surprising. But you need to be able to understand that that assumption that assumption can be influenced by so many things. Okay, so if a person is performing a behavior, it's possible that he doesn't have all the opportunities and resources, but because it is that the best behavior at that time that he's supposed to do it, he will do that. The theory doesn't account for that. The theory doesn't also account for other variables that can affect a person's behavioral intention. Why? For example, a person may have fear, threats, mood, or past experience. That's why he's taking a decision, not because he understands why he's taking the decision. This is not captured in the theory. So we need to understand that not all theories are perfect. Some of them may have some understanding and they'll be able to explain certain type of um, um, uh, issues, but they may not be able to do all. You need to explain certain types of issues, but they may not be able to do all. Okay, so let's continue. Now, assumptions in a theory means that in every single theory, there could be certain types of things that are assumed or are taken as existing, so they can then go ahead and make certain decisions. Now, it happens that cultural assumptions, temporal assumptions, or any career assumption, and then state and spatial assumptions. So in the cultural dimensions, there's somebody called Hofstede who developed the Hofstede cultural dimension, individualistic and collectivist, like the Americans are a higher person's needs and goals are prioritized and versus the goals of the group organization. So if someone is higher, they go with the latter. They tend to find the individual goals going, no, instead of prioritize versus the needs and goals of the group or clan or organization. So the individual one is the first part. The second one is the group or the organizational one. Masculine society have different rules for men and women, less so in feminine cultures. Uncertainty avoidance. How comfortable are people with changing the way they work or live or prefer known system? So high uncertainty avoidance has a high risk, and the low uncertainty uncertainty avoidance means that there's lower risk. Okay. Power distance. The degree at which people are comfortable with influencing upwards, accepting inequality in distribution of power in society. Okay, so that one too, sometimes people accept inequality in your society because of the power that exists. It's something that is observable within some of the communities. Now, Hofstede took these dimensions and used to look at different nations. So it's kind of a continuum where they try to explain each of them and how it affects a person's behavior. Strategic planning model used by businesses to understand cultural differences between various countries. So there's low and high. So power distance, if it is low, there's going to see we see more of a power sharing. If it is high, you're going to see more of authoritarianism. Good. Total, completely one man show. Then collective interest will be seen when it is low in the individualism versus collectivism, and then individual interest will be seen as high. Then gender equality, masculinity will embrace more the fact that women equality matters in the low one, but the other part will say no. Let's follow the culture. Patriarchally, I'm supposed to go on and become the leader. I want it, something like that. Uncertainty avoidance index, greater innovation, less innovation. Okay. Indulgence, pessimism, and then optimism. So optimism is on the high and the pessimism is on the low. Okay. So the countries that tend to dominate are shown here. So if you look at power distance, it's very high in Philippines, but it's low in the Americas. But individualism is very high in the Americas and quite low, even lowest more in South Korea. Okay. So these are the dimensions that tend to matter when you are looking at the different types of cultural assumptions that influences people's societies. Mhm. Then the assumption in terms of time, there's this what we call the diffusion innovation by Rogers that talks about the fact that when the technology comes or when somebody will diffuse something, there is the first 2.5% who go for it. That's innovators, early adopters 13.5, late majority, and the laggards. So this particular model was developed in a way to be able to understand how things get communicated in society over time, and then why people tend to adopt it. So the adoption or new behavior of a new behavior or product does not simultaneously occur, does not happen simultaneously in the organization system. It's rather a process whereby some people are more up to the innovation than others. So 2.5% are the innovators. They will take risks and go for it and try out the thing as soon as it comes out. The 13.5, which is the next one, is early adopter. They will think about it carefully. They may consult some opinion leaders before they take the advantage. Okay. The early majority has the ones who are real leaders, but they do adopt new ideas before the average person. They are typically they need evidence that the innovation works before they are willing to adopt it. Okay. Late majority, these are people who are skeptical of change. So they will sit down, they don't do anything about it. And they'll wait for the others and see what is happening. And now 34% who will never even move. Then there's a last about 16% we call the laggards. They are bound to tradition and they are bound to cultural perspectives and they don't want to leave anything behind. They want to still stay where they are. They are very skeptical of change and they are the hardest group to bring on board. So when Rogers talked about the future innovation, knew that when there's a new technology, before it can permeate into the society very well, it has to overcome these hurdles. There are those who will quickly go for it. There are those who have to still convince that it matters. Okay. So to be able to appreciate how then would the person move from the diffusion to adoption, he came up with certain strategies. He said that you become aware of the innovation, you decide to adopt it or reject it through at the innovation stage. Then you do initial use of it to test it, and then you can emulate it to continual use. The adoption factor that kind of influences whether an organization will use these findings or not is one. Relative advantage, the degree to which the innovation is seen as better than the idea, program, and the product it replaces. As a compatibility, how consistent the innovation, how consistent the innovation is with the values of experiences and needs of potential adopters. Then question three, how difficult are the difficult are the innovation, how difficult the innovation is to understand and use? How difficult do we have to? What's the difficulty level for appreciating and understanding the innovation that we want to be able to deploy? So now all of these things our objective is trying to adopt a particular innovation. So the advantage is it good for me? Compatibility means that can it fit my current lifestyle? Complexity is that is it easy for me to use? Triability is that can I have it for some time and test it and maybe use it for some time and become convinced? Observability means that can we see tangible results when we start using this particular technology or this particular behavior, we start following it? Can we see, are we going to get innovative results out of that? So this is what you may access. So this is a diffusion of innovation, which talks about the stages of adoption. Okay. Now, it has been applied to so many disciplines, from healthcare to looking at people using it to examine different types of groups or approach to or participatory approaches within a phenomenon that we are trying to study. So adoption could have a group or a participatory approach. It works better with adoption of behaviors rather than cessation or prevention of behavior. The theory is not for stopping behavior, it's for adoption of the behaviors. It doesn't take into account an individual resources or social support to develop a new behavior. I mentioned that area. And that's why I'm saying that it may be dependent on how you conceptualize your whole state. You can bring in another variable to account for this. Now, when you have a theory can also exist at different levels. For example, at the micro level, where the individual is, or at the meso level, where the organization is, or sometimes the industry is, and at the macro level, where you have the institutions existing at, and the meta level, when you have cross-country level. So when you are talking about theories, sometimes it's very important that you specify where you are applying it at what level are you applying it from? Okay, at what level are you applying it from? Okay. So now I mentioned that sometimes theories are also based on the type of assumption in terms of whether it is dynamic or non-dynamic. Now, this is a theory of and the resource-based theory. When it was formed, it was arguing that firms have got heterogeneous resources and immobile resources that give them sustained competitive advantage. But for that to happen, the firms should be able to exhibit these type of dimensions: variability, reliability, imperfect immutability, and sustainability. Now, if it is done well, it leads to competitive advantage. That's the static market. But you have to appreciate that with time in society, a particular market can become also very volatile and dynamic, very, very dynamic. And when it becomes unstable and dynamic, what do we do about it? So another person came and postulated, apart from Bunny, who postulated this, came and postulated what we call the dynamic capabilities approach. Then what happens? There are four capabilities are needed. Adaptive capabilities for you to identify opportunities, absorptive capabilities for you to absorb new knowledge and external knowledge, and then innovative capabilities create the knowledge and be able to create new knowledge in this scenario. Okay. So what we see is that for it to be able to happen, you need certain dimensions that can guide coordination, learning, and reconfiguration. So these things come together to be able to point out what we call the dynamic capabilities framework or approach of getting this thing done. Okay. Okay. So we are come to the end. Today we are looked at defining the research framework, and we look at types of research framework, we look at modern blocks of a theory. What I'm it's interesting about in is the fact that you can be able to appreciate that when you look at a paper, you can see this is a research framework. And you ask yourself, is it a schematic diagram built out of literature or existing literature or built out of your readings? So these are things that I will ask about. Is it about this? So when I point out this particular uh, um, um, theory and I'm using it in my work, I always have to understand what are the components of the theory I'm using. If I choose TAM, what are my components? If I choose a theory of plan B, what are my components? Good. So the defining a research framework, a systematic and organized way of finding answers to questions. The framework then guides the research process to be able to find the answers to questions. Within the framework, there can be questions. And that apart from the questions, it will be operationalized as research as a research design where we go and collect data to analyze, and after analyzing be able to find answers. But that research design, we have to have a research framework, the way we are going to carry out the design of the research, the way, what variables are we looking for, what are the relations between the variables, and how do we communicate it. Okay, so that's the types of research frameworks. We also explained that one, and from there we talked about the building blocks of a theory. We talked about constructs, we talked about logic, we talked about assumptions, and we're also able to talk about the fact that propositions, that's the relationship that exists between constructs, the relationship that exists between contracts. So we have these things, and all these things play a very key role in carrying out the study. So defining a research framework has been done, types of research framework has been done. Remember, we mentioned that the way we come up with a research framework is either through the literature itself or through you read the literature and it guides you to be able to select. Or you can also have a research from a theory, existing theory, and you see how best you can apply it. And sometimes people combine the two. They read the literature, they do have the theory, and they combine the two to be able to solve the phenomenon that they are studying. Okay, okay, so then let's look at some practice questions that I will need you to do. What makes a statement a theory, not just a sentence? Why does society need theories? What's the difference between a construct and a variable? Which of the building blocks of a theory matters most and why? Okay. So this is what I would like you to take as a takeaway from your session one. Go and work on this next week when you come and we're having a tutorial session. I'll explain this. So it's been nice bringing this session to you. We have been able to explain what the theory is. We have been able to look at how it's applied, especially at the PhD level, and then the master's and the research type work type of level. And we also talked about um, the building blocks of a theory and what matters most. Good. And these things have been put together to be able to help you understand what a research framework is and then how theories come to inform the research framework. Good. So please answer these questions and then on a piece of paper with your name and index number, the next week we'll discuss it. Thank you very much.